Recording in progress.
Just a minute to turn it off. All right, good evening. It is 7 p.m. on Thursday, March 23rd. I'm calling the Lunenburg Finance Committee to order. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. The following information is provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate remotely from a computer, please use the link attached in the agenda posted on the town calendar, or from a telephone, dial the toll-free number also attached on the agenda. This agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by open meeting law. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any announcements from the committee tonight? Excellent. Hearing none. We're 3 minutes early, but if we'd like to start with PAC, it sounds wonderful.
Joe is here for all the questions I can't answer. Just so we know where we're going. So some years ago we would video town meetings with one camera on a tripod. What you should be seeing on the picture in front of you on the first slide, that's what we now set up. We have 4 cameras. We can connect into the voting machine, we can connect into the presentation. So we're doing a much more professional job, which for a very small town and a very small PAC, we're very pleased that we managed to do that. Right now we have a system set up in the studio so we can integrate Zoom properly into our system when we are broadcasting from the auditorium. Work in progress. As a preamble, the PAC revenue comes from Comcast and it is restricted for running the PAC services. It's both capital improvements and operations. It doesn't affect the town budgets directly. The franchise fee is the principal source of this PAC income, and I'll get into details. In addition, we get interest monthly from the funds reserved for fitting out and equipping a new studio. So right now we have a 900 square foot room at TC Passios set up as a studio. When all the shuffling of buildings is completed, we're looking for a larger space that then we can become more permanent. The next slide has the actual Comcast fee income. This is very difficult to try and work out what it's going to be. One of the issues, which I will cover again later on, to do with cable cutting. Our fee comes from video services, not internet services on the cable system. So if people, they're frequently not cutting the cable. They're using it for internet instead. They're still using rights of way through the town. So our revenue potentially will be going down. And we talk to other PACs around in Massachusetts, and some of them have seen quite significant reductions. For calendar year 22, that's the last one I had complete data for, we actually went up 4%. That can be done by people building new properties, can be done by people coming out of COVID who are now got some more revenue coming in and take premium services they didn't take. If they're taking Netflix over the internet on the Comcast cable, we get nothing from that at this point. So our anticipated income for financial year 24, I took the Comcast numbers and took the last one and just raised it a very small amount. So in here It's our best guess, but it'll be in the ballpark. For the last 4 years or so, it's been round about $50,000 a quarter. So 205 seemed like a good number. We have around about 900,000, a little more, in the enterprise fund, and that earns interest, which the number we had was 6,600 on that. And we right now are exploring with the young lady sitting over there to try and find out what we're allowed to do, being a government, to see if we can improve how much we get from that. My choice was basically to put all of it on the Pats going the whole way, but she so far hasn't let me consider that one. T-bills, who knows what, but we believe we can get more. I have not put a different number in here. This is the one we have. The good news is, if anything, it would go up. So then we looked at the fringe or indirect costs, something that confuses me thoroughly every year. I took the numbers that we actually had from last year. Not knowing any better, I took the health insurance and put it up by 10%. If anybody can tell me what the real number is going to be, I'll be grateful. But I suspect, do we know the number yet?
6.2.
6.2. This is good. Thank you.
Phone a friend.
So, but at the moment the numbers are all set up around that. So it's set up in the best direction. So it'll improve, not get worse. So the number we have at the end of this is the 51,508 would be the indirect costs, which is the Medicare, it's the health insurance, workers' compensation, all those kinds of things. We right now do not have a production technician. We are extending an offer as we speak to somebody. That means some of these that have been paid, I will get to, will actually come back to us. But from here on in, all being well, they will be the numbers that we're looking at. So because we've not had the production technician for 9 months of this financial year, they take the fringe benefit costs thing, they take that off us right on the 1st of July of the financial year. And if there's left over, it's returned to us. So for 9 months, we have not had the production technician. So the result of this slide here shows that there will be about 22,700 coming back to us. We can't count that as income, despite the fact it's coming into our fund, because it was already our money. So despite the fact counting it twice can get interesting.
Does that just go into the reserve account at that point then?
Is the one?
Does that just go into the reserve account at that point then?
No, that goes into the enterprise fund.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if you meant the enterprise fund.
Yes.
That's the fund reserved for PAC, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I misunderstood it. The next slide, being one of my favorites, is the detail budget. And you can see on the screen how amazing it is to read. So as a special treat, as the older I get, the next slide is the same information made bigger, so, which I need as well. I can go through any part of this in detail if you would like, or we can come back to it with specific questions if you would like. We're better off working at the next level up for it. But this is the worksheet behind the next set of numbers. So the next slide has the summary budget on it. And starting at the top, the salaries, 111,000 approximately. That's presuming production technician is here for the whole year. Joe's costs, we have the indirect costs we just mentioned, the 51,000, comes to 162,500. The other operations, so all the bits and pieces we need to do, buying small things for the studio like consumer level cameras that people can borrow, just running the place with inexpensive things, comes out at $22,300. So the total operations is $184,769. Always amazing when you can get to $1. That's what spreadsheets. That's really what spreadsheets shouldn't be allowed to do. Our estimated income, which we've just seen, 211,000, and as a strategy, we should not have operations exceeding our income for any year, despite the fact we have the reserve fund. Because if you do that, you will run into trouble eventually. So right now our target is not to do that. We do have capital for $30,000. That's in reserve, not because we can start building the new studio yet, but if a major piece of equipment, the Castus, which is the server in the room back there, I believe was about $20,000 last time the previous machine got seriously tired and stopped working. We must have some money available to keep the system running. We do use that. I think this year was the year we put in a portable, a movable lighting grid in the TC Passios room. One problem with TC Passios, we can't drill holes in the wall. We can't fasten things to the floor, because if you do, you're playing with the potential for both lead and asbestos, neither of which is good for people, neither of which is very good for equipment either. So the total, 214,000, that's all our expenses, assuming 30,000 can come from the enterprise fund, and the rest comes from the revenue coming in from Comcast. The excess of income over budget is $27,000, and that goes into the enterprise fund. One thing we have to be aware of is we do not get any more capital infusion from Comcast. That only happens at contract time. We got some at the last contract time, which was 2017. 17 sound right? So we're not getting it at the moment, and I have no idea what a next contract might show up for us. So our total operations is less than our expected income. We met that goal. The fund that we have at the end of financial year 2022 was about $933,000, which sounds like a lot of money till you find out you have to start spending it. When we get some space, it's our responsibility to do the inside work to that space. We're talking soundproofing, special floors, framework in the ceiling to hang lights, microphones, all this kind of stuff. That's all very labor intensive and material expensive. We've spoken to other ones around who typically have got much more money than we have. Our best guess just for that part of the process, so no electronics, all the editors, the Castus, the TriCaster, all the various pieces we need to run this show, that is on top of that. When we've talked to other places like Leominster, I believe their place that they've just opened in the last 18 months or so, I believe was $2.7 million. However, their town is about 4 times as large as our town. So their income from Comcast, and they may have Verizon as well, is a lot more than we get. So we're trying to do a balance for a small town, a small pack, and do the best we can. So if we do all the sums, it looks like we'll be close to $1 million at the end of next financial year, which, given inflation, given the increasing cost of materials, given the increasing cost of labor, may not even be keeping its head above water in terms of where we were a couple of years ago. So in terms of our income, we've all heard of cable cutting. What frequently happens is people stop taking video services. They may keep the cable and they use it for internet. So these are the formal names for all these pieces. It's an act to modernise funding for community media. So the fees we get at the moment came from the Cable Act of 1984. The internet wasn't actually used very much in 1984. Very little video streaming. In fact, my television was wood-fired at that time, I believe. Now there are two bills. One is HD 74, the other is S 34. And this time, last year it went to two committees and didn't make it. This year it's gone directly to a joint committee, which is a big step forward. And it isn't a start over. This is actually picking up from the work that was done last session. So we're hopeful that this one comes through. Benefit is we don't have to negotiate a contract individually by town, by city. It's done for the whole state. It is for delivery of streaming video services, which is where a lot of people would move to if they're not taking what are usually called linear video services from Comcast. 20% of it would go to the state general fund, 40% would go to municipalities, and 40% would come to community media. What is entirely unclear to me is what happens with the contract we already have for the rest of the services, because that's got another 5 years to run. We are hopeful from everyone we talk to. There's a group of called Mass Access that is negotiating on behalf of all the PACs in Massachusetts. They've employed lawyers and such like. We're hopeful this makes it through. We're hopeful we'll understand it much better. The only other thing I have is the proposed warrant, which I can read to you, but because the warrant's closed 3 days ago, this was put in. The wording is the same as last year's. The motion that will end up being put up at town meeting will have actual numbers in it. So that was the 3-minute special, but you didn't want the 45-minute special. If you have any questions, I will attempt to answer them, and in the event I can't, I will turn around and ask our manager.
Any questions from anyone?
I have a couple. So the first question is, recently several events have had, cable dropping issues, bandwidth issues, or that sort of thing. So I know, like, when they were had the big select board meeting at the school, it dropped on us. There was another time, I think there was another one that dropped. Have we pinpointed the issue related to that? Do we have fixes so that we can get past that? And if not, do we have a plan to maybe invest in something?
There's no if not.
Okay.
We are going to fix. We had 5 days' notice of putting that together. Basically, what we took in there was the equipment and setup we used for town meeting. The difference is town meeting is not broadcast live on the cable system because we want people to show up and vote. So we were trying to jury rig something along with IT. And historically, the school system and the rest of the town had separated networks. So they jury-rigged a bypass just for us to try and make that work. Didn't work very well because, in part, the bandwidth wasn't specifically limited to us. We also, some of what we were using was wireless, and because of that, who knows what else is on the wireless, especially in a school auditorium where everybody knows the password. So we were not in control of how to manage that. The Castus, which is the server in the room here, that interfaces to the cable, decided it didn't like what was going on and had its own personal conniption as well in the midst of doing this. We had a number of things come together. What we're doing right now, we have set up at the studio the equipment that we use for a town meeting. We've added a couple of laptops to it. Amazing, you can buy them for $500 nowadays, so that we can put the Zoom up properly. We can get the images that we would be sending out to the cable like we are here. We can bring those as if we were a participant on Zoom. So anyone watching via Zoom can go to PAC or whatever it ends up being called, and they will see and hear what's going on in the auditorium. So we're trying to not only get past what didn't work as well as we hoped it would, but make an even better way of it running.
Okay, so you don't need any additional monies to make that happen, it's just
Right
network.
now, we're working with IT, still waiting to hear back from them.
Okay,
We set up earlier this week, Joe and I put all the system together, and we got the Zoom part working. And we were using the newly configured joint network. So we were on the school network at TC Passios. It's still left over as being school. And we were controlling the casters from there.
okay,
And there was no wireless piece. We've gone old-fashioned. We've actually wired it, this area, because we can't predict the behavior of the wireless part of it. That much is working. We have the Zoom piece working, so we can set as switcher up as a participant. Right now, we need from IT a small piece of information, which is the port address to get into the casters. We have spent, I think, $1,200 is the most we've spent so far. Two laptops and a bunch of converters.
Yep.
So we've spent, and that would be our normal kind of expense anyway. I'm not privy to anything IT might have spent, but
Okay.
yeah, so there's no or else. We're going to make this work.
okay. So you mentioned Zoom. I don't know if the Zoom fees are covered under PAC or the town side, but there are times when we actually hit the limit on the number of Zoom participants. Have we?
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
I know the school department has.
That's on your side? Okay.
Yeah.
It's now 1,000? Okay, okay. So hopefully we don't,
Yeah, I thought there shouldn't be a limit if it's commercial.
No, it's not to, it's another add-on.
okay, okay.
If we get 1,000 people having problems with their taxes, all showing up through Zoom. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. So the final one is on the Act to Modernize Funding for Community Media.
Yes,
Do we have folks kind of analyzing that as the bill is being done? Because the trend we see is Lunenburg does not typically get its fair share and sometimes seems to actually help fund other towns, ironically. But so my question is you know that would become a very important revenue stream for your operations and for the town services.
Correct.
Are we monitoring it to make sure that it's written in such a way that Lunenburg and towns like Lunenburg,
the magic words are actually in there, I believe, or I may have missed them. Money is collected at the state level and dispersed based on population. So it isn't somebody's opinion, it is math.
okay,
But
they've got some funky math. You can
Oh.
watch last night's show and you'll see math that blows your mind.
this, we're not directly involved with, other than we are part of Mass Access. And we pay a fee to them. And they are employing the attorneys to do things. I understand your point. So far, I have faith in that single line in a presentation.
Okay.
We're not going to know until the thing is properly written, but
Okay,
they are on our behalf trying to stay on top of it.
okay. That's all I had.
You stole my question.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. But that does worry me a little bit, because the population of Massachusetts right now is just under 7 million.
Yeah,
And if we're talking 40% of what they generate is coming to all municipalities, split up by population,
yeah.
we are a very small fraction in that.
I haven't been able to get to any of the numbers, but if you start looking at what some people have done, which I find amusing. They take the video services off and then they start subscribing to all these streaming services because they do want MASH, they do want The Big Bang Theory, and they're being carried. I don't know if this is the way it is, but
It is.
you
I'm
have
guilty
to
of that.
sign up for a lot, and then the kids come along, they've got to sign up for 5 more, and you end up paying what you paid before. However, the 40% worries me, as it appears to worry you, because if they're doing that, it sounds like it could be quite a lot less. However, what I haven't found out, haven't heard anyone talk about, does the contract process for people who just stay on regular Comcast TV, is that still in place? Or does this preempt that? It would make sense for it just to carry on. It'll get a lot more difficult to negotiate contracts, I believe. Though. But I have seen no predictions.
I mean, I suppose we could do a reverse calculation of it and say that if our income is $200,000 a year, what percent if we
Oh, yes, right.
just work backwards and say that the state
Right.
needs to bring in X number of $1 billion so we can get our 200,000,
Yeah.
and whether or not that's written into those laws to see
Right.
is that even feasible, or what are they looking at actually taxing?
As far as I can tell, it won't be up for discussion by individual towns. The towns' representatives will be responsible for doing that, but it will be the same for all of Massachusetts. I think Senator Markey is also looking at doing a national version, but I've only heard that said once. I don't know if it's for real.
The other question I had was from earlier in the presentation. Nope, we actually already addressed it. So that was all I had as well.
Thank you.
So that was an easy one. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? We're done?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. All right, moving along, sewer department.
All right.
Welcome back.
Well, thank you. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Bill Bernard. I'm the DPW director. John Reynolds, the sewer commission chair, was supposed to be here tonight to give this presentation, but he wasn't feeling well, so I'm subbing in for him.
Excellent.
All right, so on that presentation, just a year in review. The commissioners are John Reynolds is the chairman, Brett Ramson is the vice chair, Dave McDonald is the clerk, Mike Devakis and Mike Nault round out the team. Like I said, I'm the DPW director. We have a new business manager, Paula Bertram, and we're in the process of hiring an assistant to the business manager. And we have our minutes clerk, Jane Ranley. And we want to give a big thank you to Barb Lefebvre, who is retiring soon. She's actually worked her last day. She's on vacation now. She was there as the business manager for 15 years, did a fabulous job for us, and we will greatly miss her.
Is the assistant to the business manager a new position,
It was established last year.
but hasn't been?
It was filled. Paula had that position for a year, and now she's been promoted up to the business manager.
But wasn't that somewhat intended because we knew Barb was retiring?
That was part of it. It's also, we're rather busy over there. We can use the help. Definitely need the help. Bob was putting in far too many hours.
All right, I guess I just don't understand what additional, I understand the transition period is good. What additional tasks or have come on board in the last few years related to sewer?
Well, talking with Barb, she had been asking for an assistant for quite a while, and it didn't happen until last year. Definitely at billing time, we definitely need 2 or more. It's a busy time, and that's quarterly, so
So this is a full-time
It's-
benefited position?
it's a part-time, 24 hours.
24, benefited?
Is it? Yes.
Does it have to be a benefited position?
Does it? Well,
I think they had trouble getting help when it wasn't benefit. It was only
Yeah.
like 19 hours, and they couldn't find anybody.
thank you. All right, on the next slide, the Sewer Commission was established in 2006 and operates under a sewer enterprise fund. We have approximately 16 miles of gravity sewer and 3.9 miles of force mains and 2.3 miles of low-pressure mains. And we have 10 pumping stations. And right now, we have 927 properties connected to the town sewer. So we use a couple of vendors to help us out with the system. So we have our operation and maintenance vendor, it's Chad Empey, CTE for short. And they're out there every week keeping our pump stations running properly. And then we use a company, Flow Assessment. We have flow meters, 3 of them at the 2 locations where the pipes go into Fitchburg and the 1 pipe going into Leominster that read the actual flow. And that's how Leominster and Fitchburg bill us based off of those readings. And the next slide is our operation and maintenance contractor. It's, again, CTE, Chad Empey. That contract is up this year, so we're starting to put our new RFP together, and we got to get that out and into place by July 1. On the next page, talk about the intermunicipal agreements. So that's the agreements we have between us and Fitchburg and Leominster. All of our wastewater goes to their treatment plants. So in fiscal year 20, we started paying the 20-year debt service to Fitchburg, and that's approximately $21,000 per year. And in fiscal 21, we started paying the debt service to Leominster, and that'll go through 2024, and that's when we will have to negotiate a new intermunicipal agreement with Leominster. So the approximate payments to Leominster in FY22 was $38,000, and FY23 is $41,000, and fiscal 24 we're estimating at $56,000. Sometime in fiscal 21, we changed the way we pay Leominster and Fitchburg. That's when we put in the flow meters. It was previously paid based on the water readings. So it's more fair for Leominster and it's Fitchburg because it's not just water readings going into the houses and then flush down the toilets and whatnot. There's also inflow and infiltration, which is water that gets into our system either by like illegal sump pump hookups or water that just gets in through cracks or in through manholes or just finds its way into the system somehow. So that water's still getting treated, so Leominster and Fitchburg want a full accounting of what we're sending to them.
So the debt service to Fitchburg is almost $21,000 a year. Is that flat over a period of time? Because the Leominster one seems to be escalating.
Let's see, I think I have the numbers. Paula, do you remember? I don't have the numbers right in front of me.
Okay. And then for Leominster, do we know how that's going to change over every year, or is it?
We don't because it'd be based on the new negotiations on the IMA.
We're currently starting that process. The
Okay.
IMA negotiations, and there may be changes coming. We do have the numbers on the debt service right now, but depending on how those negotiations go, those are subject to change.
Okay.
How does the, so in FY '20, if we started paying a 20-year debt service to Fitchburg, but in FY '21, we started paying based on flow meter readings to Fitchburg.
Because that's not debt, right? That's usage.
Right, so I guess I'm just curious as to how did we end up in a flat 20-year debt service with Fitchburg?
So I can definitely look at those numbers. Did you bring that big sheet, or you didn't? Because we can provide the numbers forecasting out. I'm looking out to the future years. We do have those numbers for the future years. The debt service is different than the usage charges.
Right.
Usage is the flow meters. The debt service obviously is for the work that Fitchburg has done and the work that Leominster has done in order to maintain their systems, and we pay a percentage of that.
Okay, so it's based on, so if we somehow double our usage or our hookups to town,
There's certainly a potential that our percentage would increase.
it would increase just for the flow meter readings, but still the debt service would remain flat for the next,
As of right now,
32
again,
or
that's subject
12
to
year- 18 years.
negotiation.
Okay.
When we renegotiate the IMAs. And right now, we're in the process of starting the IMA discussions with Leominster.
okay. Do we have an IMA negotiation happening before 2040 with Fitchburg?
I don't know.
What's that? I'm not sure what
Or
the
is
date
that
is.
set, like, it seems like a really good deal, if it's for 20 years?
I don't disagree. I can get those numbers to you. We do have the debt service numbers. Karen, do you have them right there? Because you had given them to me.
But I think what's in your budget is different than the debt, because the debt service.
I don't mean the total debt service, because the debt service that I have is for the town, for our town. I'm talking about the debt service to Fitchburg.
No,
Okay.
I wouldn't have.
Okay. I do have those numbers, unfortunately, and we don't have the forecast out, but I can get them to you.
Your retained earnings slide later on does forecast debt service out through 2031. Is
That debt service is
that
different than the debt service we're talking about here. The debt
Okay.
service we're talking about here is for work that Fitchburg and Leominster do. The debt service that's talked about later is for the work that we've done in town. So those are loans that the town has taken in order to fund the various sewer projects.
Okay.
I guess as a follow-up to that one, do we have sort of any control as to whether it goes to Fitchburg or whether it goes to Leominster?
Control of what? The wastewater?
The-
Go
Exactly.
left or right.
Right,
Our goal is always to try to go to Leominster.
okay, cheaper,
Simply because our connection fees are less.
okay,
And are significantly less. And Fitchburg right now is under a consent decree from the Department of Environmental Protection for issues at their plant. So our best option is always to go to Leominster.
okay, okay. And I guess the last question I have on wastewater is, I know wastewater testing is done for Board of Health stuff. Does that happen at the actual treatment facilities on their end, or does that happen within Lunenburg before it reaches the treatment facility?
At the treatment centers.
Okay, so it's going to be a regional-ish measurement, okay.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, the bottom line, right? So the commission, and myself, we're committed to reducing inflow and infiltration, because that's just water that's costing us money that shouldn't be there, so. Yeah, and flow assessment, they've updated their equipment, so we're getting accurate readings, so it's behooving on us to get rid of some of the INI, the inflow and infiltration, so.
Does that include stormwater runoff in some instances?
It could, yeah, if it sneaks into the system somehow, it could,
Not
Go through a
designed,
manhole
it's not
cover.
designed to be.
not by
included.
design, but
Okay,
it's what finds its way in.
okay,
Yeah.
so we're not talking,
That is INI. It can be
Yeah.
groundwater or it can be stormwater.
okay.
Right. Or it could be illegal hookups,
Didn't know those existed.
yeah. All right, operating budget facts. At the close of FY '22, we had approximately 2.2 million in retained earnings. When we made out the budget this year, we plan on transferring $427,718 from retained earnings to fund our operating budget. The reasons for that is we need additional monies for the increased Leominster usage costs. Then again, due to the changeover to those flow meter readings. To pay off our Leominster and Fitchburg required debt service payments. We do anticipate increased costs for the operation and maintenance of the pump stations. Like I said, we're going to put out a new contract. I can't see how it's going to stay the same. It's going to be more. We're planning $96,000 in capital and expenditures. We're looking at doing pump station upgrades. The pump stations are approaching the end of their predicted useful life, so we want to get started on that. We want to do, this is where you wrote here, manhole replacements. It's manhole covers. There's some that are sinking, some that are kind of rattling, some are letting water in, and other inflow and infiltration work. We're probably going to be looking at doing some manhole lining and definitely trying to find where the inflow and infiltration is getting into our system. You know, we're looking at technology now that'll help us pinpoint it so we know where to focus. And also, we have $163,406 in town debt service. That's the difference between, how do I explain it? Oh, the town debt service is, it was like close to $600,000. Our estimated betterment revenues was $400-something-thousand. So we're looking at a deficit there of $163,000. And we also have to appropriate $37,600 to the OPEB and the Capital Reserve Stabilization Fund.
Do you know which projects made up that town debt service that you speak of in the second to last sub-bullet?
Yeah, that's all the sewer projects, right? The initial one in, what was it, 2004-ish, and then the next one a few years later.
Okay, and those town debts, if again I go forward a little bit, are starting to tail off this year into next year?
Yes.
Okay, so it's kind of we're at the end.
Our high point
Yeah.
Okay,
is this year, and it starts to go down after 2024.
okay.
Right. All right, and any unexpended expenses are returned to retained earnings at the end of the fiscal year. All right, on the next slide, we're looking at our expected revenues. I can go through them all if you like, or just hit the highlights. The big one obviously is user charges, which is our quarterly billing, and our irrigation fees. We're estimating $1.1 million. And we estimated the other fees kind of based on the last few years and how things have been going. So we have our usual transfers of funds to the I&I Stabilization Fund, the transfer to the Sewer Capital Reserve Fund, and the transfer to the Reserve Capacity Stabilization Funds. So our expected revenues are $1.2 million, just over $1.2 million.
Is that user charge number that you came up with, is that just a percentage-based increase from last year's actuals?
Yes.
Okay, or is it sort of the trend, you've just followed a trend on that one, or how do you end up with that one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
1.1 million. We have our year-to-date today, based on we're in our third quarter currently. So we looked at, we're slightly under target for this year, based on the fact that we only have one more quarter. But our hope is with 6 additional connections that we'll hit that 1.1 number
Okay.
in fiscal '24.
How many users do we have approximately?
Currently 927.
927?
Yep.
So this is what, about 260 to 280 a quarter per person roughly?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Any other questions on revenues?
For me?
All right. I'm going to look at our expenses. Regular expenses, we have obviously payroll, purchase of service, which is our contracts, the operation and maintenance contract, the flow meter contract, infrastructure repairs that we may have to do, the I&I repairs that we may have to do, our legal fees, and when we need engineering support. We're estimating that to be $290,000. We have to pay the utility companies. And the big number is the direct expenses that we pay to Leominster and Fitchburg. Again, based off the flow meter readings, we estimate that at $740,000. We have to pay capital expenses towards Leominster and Fitchburg and other planned capital expenses. So our anticipated expenses are $1.35 million. We also have to pay the indirect cost, insurance, fringe benefits, shared cost.
What's shared costs?
Part of my salary is paid by the sewer enterprise fund, 15%,
15%. Anyone else's or just yours?
just mine. So our total current year expenditures, including the indirect costs, is $1.4 million.
So sorry, so is 15% of payroll also your salary and 15%, or is it all in just that shared cost line?
My salary is just in that shared cost line.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so on the next page, next slide is the summary. So again, our revenues, it's 1.2 million. Our expenditures is 1.4 million, so we're looking at a $218,000 deficit. And again, back to that debt service, it's, like I said, it was $646,000. We expect betterment revenues of $483,000, so the difference between those two is another $163,000. Add that to the $218,000, we're looking at a deficit of $382,000. We also have to pay out the OPEB trust, and we have to appropriate monies from retained earnings to capital reserve stabilization, and appropriate retained earnings to reserve capacity. When you add it all up, we're looking at a deficit of $427,718. Again, that was the money we're going to take out of our retained earnings to balance our budget. So if you look at the next page, the graph, we kind of,
I just want to,
go ahead.
all of the income surrounding this is by the 927 users, right? It's a complete, it's self-funded enterprise
Yes,
fund service. So no money's come from the town capital or anything else.
correct.
Okay.
All right, so looking at the next slide is the graph. So the orange line is our retained earnings. You can see there's a dip in it. We had to take some out this fiscal year, we're taking out more next fiscal year, but then it starts to level off after that. The blue line is our betterment revenues, so they're declining until about for the next 4 years or so, and then it kind of levels off until 20 more years from now. And the other line is the reddish line is our debt service. And again, you can see it's coming down and leveling off, almost staying even with the betterment revenues. Any questions on that one?
Will the debt service though go up, or is there more debt coming?
Not unless we do some more major work and take out more loans.
Okay. Do you think that's, I mean, as you replace capital and that sort of thing, do you anticipate that?
Yeah. Perhaps, yeah, if we have to do major upgrades to the pump stations, we may have to take on more debt.
Okay.
Does this project any additional expansion of the sewer service over that period of time?
Paula, maybe you can answer that one.
It's very limited. This projects the 6 additional users. We're projecting 5 to Leominster, 1 to Fitchburg. Obviously, where the properties are located determines where the flow goes. I will say that we've seen a big downturn in the number of applicants for connections in the last couple of months. But as far as capital costs, we do incorporate money in the budget for manhole repairs, for capital expenditures, but we're also seeking ways to find additional monies. So we did put in some ARPA requests. We also put in a request for state earmarks of $300,000, which the selectmen have included in the list that was sent to the legislature, and that's for upgrade of the pump stations. Our pump stations are getting older. They are 18. Typically, pump stations have to be upgraded in a 20-year span. Most of ours are 18 years old. So obviously that's a concern. But as you mentioned, the average cost to a user is $260 a quarter. So we're trying to keep our costs down while maintaining the system.
What happens if the 40B project goes through, though?
Then there's significant infrastructure upgrades that would be necessary. Our existing pumps can't handle it. It would require significant engineering and review to look at that, but initially we had an engineer look at that, and I think you know those costs. I think he estimated $1.4 million for the line, and then $700,000 for a small pump station, and in excess of $1 million for a large pump station.
So potentially $2.5 million too?
No, it was closer to 4.
Oh, closer to 4, okay, well, so $4 million to go on another debt service?
Yeah, depends on how that ends up shaken out, whether or not it's the applicant's responsibility, whether it is our responsibility, or how that's gonna play out, because our pumps just are not sized for that kind of development.
Right.
Is there any data out there from other communities similar to us that have done large communities like that have put in, well, for example, when we did Arrives Lunenburg, I assume that was a large, I assume that's probably some of the debt service here that we're still paying off, correct?
Honestly, that was before my time. I don't know how Arrive worked.
Probably not, because that was already within the sewer district. So they were basically just connecting in.
Okay.
At that point, our systems probably had enough capacity to handle it.
Okay. Is there, in your experience, do you have any idea which way those negotiations have tended to go in terms of whether the developer handles a decent amount of that or whether it sort of falls on the community?
That remains to be seen. We did, unfortunately, we have received extremely limited plans. Actually, I wouldn't even necessarily call them plans. It's a line on a map showing the potential route, but because of the topography of the site, it's going to require significant pumping. Because of where the road is and how it has to tie into the system, we would prefer that the flow go to Leominster, again, because Fitchburg has some significant problems right now with consent decrees and administrative orders. But additionally, it's cheaper for the town of Lunenburg if we go to Leominster. We don't know. We did consult with an engineer, and he gave us some rough estimates based on looking at the site and looking at the topography. But without a design plan, it's impossible to forecast what the potential costs are.
Okay.
Is there a way of setting up a separate sewer enterprise fund just for that project if we were forced to do it, so that they pay all the costs associated with it?
That will definitely be something we'll be talking about with the town council. Because, and we've internally talked about, would it be a different fee? Would it be, because the cost of the upgrades to be borne by the existing customers would be astronomical.
Okay, and then one other question, on this chart, which, I like this chart because it kind of did show that what potentially looked like a really bad thing, you show a recovery path.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But are there any risks that you're tracking that are, I sound like a project manager now, but are there risks you're tracking that are not incorporated into this? Something that's, a $2 million potential hit that
We're not looking
has a high
at, we're
likelihood.
not looking at a $2 million potential hit. We are looking at, some of our manholes have to be upgraded, so Bill has kind of taken that on, and that's why you see some of our capital infrastructure costs are inflated, and that's because we hope to get in front of that, so we don't look at a $2 million expenditure, so that we're keeping up with maintenance. We're also, Bill mentioned I&I, we're also looking at innovative technology to try to track I&I and isolate the issues. And we met with representatives of a company called Fluid Conservation last week that has a very inexpensive technology that would really let us pinpoint where I&I is coming into the system and then hopefully correct it, because that is inflating our costs significantly.
Is there any thoughts about kind of sewer, water, storm water, how they interact with one another? And is there I've heard rumors of plans of water and sewer trying to come together or something. Is that just a rumor I've heard?
I'm not sure. You mean the water district, or do
Yeah.
you mean, not that I'm aware of?
Okay. Okay. But what about the stormwater? Because, stormwater, driving from my home to here, it's just, there's rivers everywhere, which affects our roads, I don't know how it's not getting into our
Well, and
drainage.
that's exactly our concern. And so trying to isolate where it's coming in, what pipes need to be corrected, because to camera all of the lines within the town would be very cost prohibitive. So if we can use this piece of equipment, which is $2,000, it's portable, can go from manhole to manhole, and we can try to track where we're seeing that I&I come in during stormwater events. And it comes with an app that we can readily access. It's a mobile app or it's a laptop app that we can tell what's happening and where the flow is coming in whenever there's a rain event. Because when there's a rain event, we shouldn't see the flow come up. And if we do, it's basically a tilt sensor. So we can see where we're getting inflow and then hopefully address, and then we can focus there to camera those lines and see what's happening.
Okay.
Right. All right.
So can I just make sure I understand the financial picture? 2.2 million of retained earnings currently. In 2024, you're going to take 427,000 from that. So you have 1.8 million, and so that's what your graph here shows. And then the main difference, as at least what I can see here when you project out in this graph, is that your debt service decreases by, pretty dramatically right in 2025 and then forward. So that's the real difference, right? That's what recovers
Exactly.
that.
Our debt service to Lemonster goes down drastically
Okay,
over the next couple of years. And then we're done paying by 20...
It's 48.
48.
2048, but the payments go down very drastically after 2025. So
Okay.
that's why
and what was that debt for? That was for what?
for, again, sewer infrastructure, going for the various projects that went to Lemonster.
Okay, and when did that happen? I'm just not familiar with it.
Karen had just given me the printout of all the different
I mean, just
loans,
round
and
numbers,
unfortunately, I honestly don't have it, but that was one of the questions I asked, is can you give
Okay.
me a breakdown of all the loans that we have?
Okay.
And she did, and I didn't bring it, so I was trying to find it on my phone, but I can't.
I think the original debt service was in 2009, I think.
Okay.
And then we did some additional stuff. It was all within maybe a 7-year period that everything was issued.
Okay. And so you're pulling from the retained earnings to kind of flatten out the charges to the users, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And so I think you said $260 a quarter, is that what you said?
That's the average.
Average.
I mean, obviously, some individuals are much higher, some individuals are lower, but if you look at the average, that's about what it is per quarter.
And what is
per
that, how
household.
does that compare to other towns?
I honestly can't answer that. It's something that I've only been here for a year, but that was one of the things I did, was try to come out with what the average user uses, and what they pay per quarter, and that's how but I haven't looked at other communities.
Okay.
Do we know if Lemonster or Fitchburg has any large projects coming online that we may need to have another debt service?
We haven't heard anything yet. Again, Fitchburg is going through
Exactly,
some
yep.
issues. And as we go through the IMA process with Lemonster, that's certainly going to be a topic of discussion.
Okay.
All right, on the next slide, Paula touched on it already. We did make 3 APA requests for the sewer manhole repairs and sewer pump station upgrades, and we asked for money for a mobile generator. Not sure if we're going to get those, so we did ask for a state earmark for the pump station upgrades, and that, like Paula said, that made the cut. That went to the state, so we're hopeful. Any other questions?
Any questions from anyone? Or additional questions?
Sorry, just one last, I mean, you quote the average, right? I'm just trying to figure out, is that both residential and commercial? So is it,
I haven't broken it out from business to residential, and obviously the costs for business are significantly higher. Dentist office, restaurants, those things do have a much higher usage rate and a much higher bill. At this point, we've only looked at the average divided by customers.
Okay.
But that's something we certainly could do, is pull out the commercial entities.
okay. Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
I don't have any questions myself. I asked them all during the presentation. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Appreciate it. There we go. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Again, for those of you that aren't familiar with the fire department, we're an all-hazards response agency. Not only do we deal with fires, medical emergencies, hazardous materials incidents, special rescue situations. Basically, it doesn't involve law enforcement. It involves the fire service. Our makeup, if you can go to the next slide. Myself, 1 full-time administrative assistant, 3 career fire officers, 5 on-call fire officers, 6 career firefighters or paramedics, and 34 on-call firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics. Next slide. We staff the fire station 24/7 with 3 firefighter EMTs or paramedics. Monday through Saturday is the career staff with 3 on duty and myself during the daytime when I'm available. Sunday is per diem firefighters that are on-call personnel that are getting their hourly rate, and they staff the station, plus with one of the fire officers on an on-call basis. They handle the initial call, but most calls, the call personnel back them up as well. There's a few that they just respond on, but a lot of calls need more than just 3 people. Next slide. We operate 3 engines, one of which doubles as a heavy rescue unit, 1 ladder truck, 2 brush fire units, 2 ambulances, 1 water rescue unit, and 3 support vehicles. Next slide. And again, our general duties: fire suppression, emergency medical services, hazardous materials response, technical rescue, public service and support, education, training, and then there's obviously an administration and support arm of the department. Next slide. Again, just a little bit of our responses for 2022. This is calendar year. The big one in there is the EMS calls. We saw a approximately 14% increase in our call volume last year, mostly in EMS calls. This is similar to what most other departments have seen in the area. We saw a significant uptick post-COVID, that there's a lot more call for medical services out there. Next slide. Just to give you a quick breakdown, this is our call volume over the years. It stayed static for a while, came up, we sort of leveled off, and then again, last year was a significant jump, and we'll see if that continues along or not.
Is there some kind of medical thing that's driving that jump?
Whole bunch of different things. There's a lot of people that are a lot sicker that are at home now because of the advances in medical care, that they're being taken care of. As you probably heard from Chief Gamble in the police presentation, there's a significant mental health issue out there that we're usually as involved as they are in that. So we see that. There's a lot of substance abuse issues that are out there. And there were a lot of people, especially elderly, that they don't have a support network. So oftentimes we end up being the support network for somebody who's fallen, getting them to the hospital, because 40, 50 years ago you had family nearby. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times family lives 1,000 miles away. So, you know, we end up working a lot with police, with Council on Aging, working with that group. But a lot of times we're the ones that are getting the call to go out there. The next slide, that's just a quick slide on the effects of some of the new growth out of the big projects in town. I always throw that one in with the talk of big developments going in, especially with multifamily ones. We see a significant increase in EMS calls, and that just the nature of how it is with a lot of people in a small place, it does impact our services. There's always discussion about being concerned about the schools and the impact on them, but it does impact public safety as well too. We see a lot more calls. These are fairly newer complexes. We don't see as much fire type incidents there, although they do happen, but it definitely impacts EMS. So next slide. For the current FY23 budget status, I didn't make a lot of spreadsheets, but basically salaries are on target for what we expect. Expense is on target. We've taken on some new things in the budget that weren't planned for that I'll talk about in the above target section, but we're covering it. We've had to move some things around, postpone some things, but we're making it work. I'll touch on that a little bit more when we get further into the presentation. We also saw an increase in the hydrant rental from Leominster. That wasn't calculated properly for several years, not on our end, but on their end. And again, I'll touch on that further along. And again, these items are funded in the town manager's preliminary budget for FY24. They were above target requests that I had, and she's seen the need, and currently they're included in the budget. One challenge we do see currently in this year's budget is vehicle maintenance. We're definitely going to exceed what we have for the budget. I'm working with the town manager on that right now. The main challenge has been fuel. As any of you probably know, if you drive a car any distance, never mind if you drive a diesel vehicle, fuel has went crazy. Again, most of our equipment runs on diesel. We've had a combination of increased call volume, so vehicles are running more, plus the fuel costs have gone up quite a bit too. So we burned through a significant part of our fuel budget already by the half-year point. And that. We also ran into some unplanned maintenance on some of the vehicles. That's always a shot in the dark. Some years we are fairly light on that. We don't run into that. Some years we do. So. And that's just a quick slide on the fuel consumption. The big one to look at is the bottom part of the slide. In FY22, we were paying $3.03 a gallon for diesel fuel. At the same time, for FY23, we were paying $5.22 a gallon for diesel fuel. And like I said, all but 3 of our vehicles run on diesel. And the ambulances put on a significant amount of mileage. We transport to further distances than we used to, and that. So that's kicked us hard. And of course, if you think back about the whole budgeting process, most of the time when we come up with numbers, that's well before any of that stuff kicked in. So, and that we've had to, that's one of our challenges, but like I said, I'm working with the town manager on that.
Do the ambulance fuel charges get rolled into the charges that get passed on to insurance companies or whomever for ambulance costs?
We would figure it in as part of the ambulance fee, but the direct fuel, there is no direct fuel charge. There's just the charge that we put out, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Yeah. So, we need to raise the fees. They haven't been raised in a while. So next slide for the proposed budget. The highlights are there's no staffing addition currently. We hit year 5 of our staffing plan this year, which brought us to 9 full-time firefighters. It continues the paramedic training. We have 1 person still finishing up in paramedic school. We will have full-time 24/7 paramedic coverage in FY24. We'll actually have it fairly soon in FY23. It includes several above-target requests in EMS maintenance, IT-related items, EMS supplies, hydrant maintenance, and again, vehicle maintenance. Next slide again. Salary lines, the increase in the career firefighter salary is contractual step increases, line increase, or raises, stuff like that. We haven't added any staff. We're not adding any staff this year. So that's a discussion for a few years down the road as we see where we're going call volume wise. Just a little bit about EMS and paramedics. The paramedic timeline, we went online with our paramedic license in January. We also had our 4th career member certified as a paramedic. Just a few weeks ago, when Captain Reese retired, we hired our 5th paramedic. We hired him out of the gate, and our 6th is in training right now. She will probably get her paramedic certification sometime in October, most likely. She'll be finishing school in September. So, just to understand why it says that, we figure March to April of this year will be 24/7 paramedic coverage. On the next slide, part of the requirements for new paramedics, which virtually all of our people are, is that once they have their certification, they have to be monitored for their first 50 advanced life support calls by an experienced paramedic, which we have a few that are part-time. So we've been bringing in the part-timers when they're available to work on shift with some of the full-timers. To get that, we've also been sending them out to ride with another busier paramedic unit in the area to get those calls. Again, the last hire, he worked for another service, so he has that already, so he can work by himself. One of our other medics is very close, and the other ones are at various steps, but as they get that, we will be able to transition, and then we'll be able to provide the service 24/7.
Do you see a risk of the paramedics getting their license and then finding better opportunity, and
Always
how
a
are we
risk.
addressing that?
Most of them are on the hook for, the ones that we've trained are on the hook for a few years for a payback on some of that. They came from our call department. They're all generally from town here. I would hope they would stay, but there's always that risk, and that's one of the things we discuss, budgetary-wise, salaries, things like that, trying to make it worth their while.
Okay,
A lot
so
of
they-
towns are in a different, less hours per week than we are, and it's tough to compete with some of the towns to the east of here. I've lost at least one good one that didn't take a job here because he could go to work in another town for about $4 an hour more to start. And that's, paramedics, especially firefighter paramedics, are in extremely high demand. We're fortunate to hang on to the ones that we've got right now, so.
Yeah, they're extremely valuable, though, too.
Yes, they are very valuable, and they can kind of write their own ticket on where they go. So
Okay.
there's something, we definitely want to hang on to them. But it's something, we've run into relying on other communities for so much, especially with the call volumes. The private ambulance service doesn't have the people anymore. The staffing issues that you hear everybody else talk about everywhere affects private EMS and emergency services as well. They've lost a lot of people. They're not available as much. The city of Leominster started their own paramedic service like we did. They're using a different model, but same thing, they're running it out of the fire department because they couldn't count on them either. And so they need, and there's more accountability that we can keep track of it. And again, we have 3 people in the fire station that can man a fire engine to go out if there's a fire, and those still do happen. So, and the difference of having 3 people on that engine company makes a world of difference. That I think we've had a couple of fires that's made a real big difference, having those people in right away. So,
Do you think the most recent collective bargaining agreement has at least,
it's helped.
it's helped?
It's helped,
Okay.
and we're in the middle of negotiations now, we just
Right.
started. But yes,
Okay.
it made a difference.
Yep.
It's pushing us up, but it's still a challenge to, against some of the other departments in the area. So,
Okay.
and they're seeing the same challenge as we are. They're struggling to get people. So,
Yeah.
and that nobody, like they say, nobody wants to work.
Yeah.
I'm happy with the people I've got. They do a great job, and I'm hoping they stick around for a long time. So, the next slide, you had asked about EMS billing. We can bill more for advanced life support calls. I think a question had come back. It was, the billing is based on the care we provide, not where we pick somebody up. There was a question about mutual aid. I'm sure that's going to pick up. The whole area has seen that, and we spend a lot of time, everybody's spending time in each other's communities. And I point out for years, we have relied on them for ALS. So if they call us a few times, it's not going to hurt my feelings that much. We can charge if we intercept and jump into their truck, if they're not running at the paramedic level, just like they did with us for years. We've had a grand total of 1 of those so far. And I suspect we will see some of it, but I think given the other communities around that are paramedic, we're going to see far more transports, and there's a lot more money available in the transports. And that we haven't increased ambulance billing in about 6 or 7 years. Looking at the rates compared to other communities around here, we are in the lower end, and that's a conversation for myself and the town manager with the selectmen, that we need to start looking at bringing that up.
Is that ultimately decided by the select board?
Yes.
Okay.
That's ultimately their call.
Okay.
So, and as I always say, the makeup of the town is, we run over 60%, that is usually because of the elderly in that. It's Medicare, Medicaid, government health insurance. We usually, regardless of what we charge, we have to accept a certain rate. So increasing the rates gain us something, but it doesn't gain us, there's a diminishing return there. But again, and I always look at it as, we're not going to run it as an enterprise fund, but it offsets the cost of what we're doing and providing a better service to the community. So, next slide. Other budget items, just to run through them quick, we had requested a slight increase in the recertification stipends for some of our on-call EMTs and paramedics, just because we've added a few. In the expense lines on the next slide, above target request in EMS maintenance for $9,000. This was maintenance agreements for some of the advanced life support equipment that we carried, the monitor defibrillators, the CPR, mechanical CPR machines that we use, our as we call it, the military-grade vending machine that we store all our medications in. That gives us accountability, tracking, and not just anybody can go take them out. Only certain people that are authorized to do that can do that. But under the state requirements, just like in a hospital, these have to be inspected yearly, maintained, and like everything else, the rates for these annual agreements have gone up. And there's not, it's not like you have vendor A, vendor B, vendor C that you can pick from. You got to deal with who makes the unit. So, and that we've asked for that. And again, this is pretty much all of these but one are covered in the town manager's preliminary budget. Again, IT software, we've added some software programs that, again, we really didn't have covered in the budget. We felt the value and the need for them, so we added them in. They include a program called DTS that handles our payroll, it handles our scheduling, it handles tracking overtime, and eventually when Munis is fully updated, this will integrate with the town's overall system. But we found it, as the department's grown, trying to track payroll, trying to cut down on payroll errors, the system has made a big difference for us. The police use the same type of program, it's just a slightly different version of it.
So the departments don't all use the same payroll system?
We're all under Munis for the town. We were doing it still on paper and then sending it up for the Munis system and that to be handled here. This has the ability to eventually electronically send that all up, but we're handling it in-house. It already does all the calculations as we put stuff together for people's rates, the minimum number of hours, things like that, where before we were doing a lot of that by hand, and that, which we were running into errors. This computerizes a lot of it. And the members are responsible to put in their own time. So they submit it, myself or one of the other officers review it, and then it goes in. And it also, the big thing for us is scheduling, for filling shifts, details, things like that. It handles all of that electronically. As Lieutenant Lekaditis behind me can attest, that was a full-time job in it itself, doing the scheduling manually before that. So,
Okay.
the PS Tracks program is an online maintenance and checklist program for all of our equipment. All the equipment has to be checked weekly. We were doing it on paper for a long time. We had gone to an earlier program that really wasn't suiting our needs. It was cheap, but again, you get what you pay for. This program keeps track of all the ambulance equipment. It keeps track of the apparatus. And when they do the checks, if there's a problem, myself, a couple of the other officers that are responsible for maintenance, we get an automatic notification so we can follow up on it. And then the Ambu Pro is part of our EMS reporting software. Some of that is covered by Neshoba Valley Dispatch, but some of it we have to pay for ourselves. And as we've gone paramedic, there's another component that we had to add and pay for ourselves that allows our medical director to review the calls remotely. And that all the advanced life support calls have to be critiqued and reviewed. That allows him to be part of that. So again, all stuff we needed. I asked for a line for that, and currently that's included in the budget.
So does that do like medical coding and billing and all that kind of thing?
It's not so much billing as it does interface directly to our billing company. So they do get that. The billing company they cross-reference the codes.
Okay.
It's more on our end. It's state reporting for data. Like a lot of other things, they track a ton of data, and this does that for us. We can just hit a button, send all the data into them. And the big thing for us is it's allowing us to do the quality assurance for, the advanced, the advanced life support calls. So, let's see. Next slide. It was IT hardware. This one isn't currently funded. The town manager and I have had a discussion. This was looking at our individual department needs on replacing a lot of the IT hardware. And it was a schedule. They're putting that underneath the regular IT department and handling that through there. But bringing that up, there were several things that we were running into that they're getting old and we needed to take care of.
But that line is still included in the budget. It's just moved.
It is included in my above target request. It is not included in the town manager's request.
But it's still,
Under the IT budget.
right, but it is still being
IT
funded, it's still
yes.
proposed to be funded.
Yep. Some other items was $3,000 increase in EMS supplies. A lot of this has been, as you're probably well aware, prices have gone up on everything. Some of this is also replacement medications for the paramedic level. We added that in. The hydrant maintenance, the extra $1,800 there. To make that story fairly quick, for years we paid a flat rate from Leominster. It never changed. What did change was Leominster had added several hydrants that are in Lunenburg, but they never added them to the list. Some personnel changes happened over there, and there was at least one year they didn't bill us until the last minute. And then when somebody started looking at it, they realized that there were several more hydrants in town that they never billed us for. So they let that 1 year slide at the regular rate, but now they're billing us at what they're actually supposed to be billing us for.
So we have hydrants in Lunenburg that are owned by Leominster?
We have several in the Whalum district, a couple down on Leominster Shirley Road, Pioneer Drive, that are physically in Lunenburg, but they're Leominster water mains that are covered in there. A lot of the Whalum, side streets in Whalum, down off Youngs Road and Summer Street. We actually also have a couple that are Fitchburg hydrants as well, but that's dealt with the Lunenburg Water Department, not the Lunenburg Water District. And then the last thing was an increase in $3,000 for fuel expense in vehicle maintenance. I came up with that number long before I saw the numbers that came up on the Q2 fuel. Owning a diesel pickup, I know the fuel prices are coming down for diesel, but they still have not come down to where they were. I'm hoping that number is going to be adequate for that. So a lot's, again, going to depend on our call volume and whether prices go crazy again. For capital plan, I mentioned we had our replacement of Rescue 1 on there. That is funded currently with the blessing of the selectmen through the ARPA funds. So that is in process now. That won't be on the capital plan. We tried to move this, or we moved this up a couple of years because right now we're looking at up to 24 months to get a replacement vehicle. And I don't know if anybody's gone car shopping right now, but it's kind of ugly. The highway department's running into the same thing with big trucks. They're seeing the same thing with ambulances trying to get chassis. So we wanted to get this in queue as much, and the prices are just, they keep jumping all over the place. So we're hoping we get it locked. We should have it locked in fairly soon.
At this point, do you think our 2014 ambulance will last for 2 years?
If we get the other one back that got hit by a distracted driver, this one's seeing a lot of use right now because it's our own ambulance and it's showing the wear and tear.
Okay.
So the plan would be to get rid of the 1998 truck that functions as a dive truck, sort of semi-retire this one to that role. Then it's only going about 50 times a year instead of a few hundred. Mm-hmm. And I think that truck would do fine at that level, but at the wear and tear it's getting right now, we've had a few challenges with it. So.
Do you have a time frame for when you're expecting the?
I mean, I'm hoping that they start getting caught up, but they're still saying it could be 2 years out from when we.
Well, I was talking about the damaged one.
Oh, the damaged one. My latest update would hopefully be within the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
It's coming back to the dealership from the Ford body shop, and they think they have about another week's worth of work.
Okay.
But they said ask me again next week. So. Let's see. The other item that was on the capital plan was the first phase of radio equipment replacement. This is our backbone, we call it, infrastructure that supports like the vehicle radios, the portable radios. This is the equipment that's mounted up at the water tank, up here in the bell tower, and a couple other places in town. We had submitted that under ARPA. Right now it's under the capital plan. And the plan would be to do this in 2 years, because this is also our radio system and the police radio system. They're very much tied together. And the thought would be that we'd be replacing, original thought would be replacing one department's equipment all the way around. Might not quite be that way, but it would still get spread out as we move into this stuff. What we're running into, radio equipment's about 12 years old, going on 13. And like the old days, they'd make parts for this stuff for 20 years. Now it's like a computer. Oh, no, it's obsolete. And what we're running into is getting harder and harder to get parts for it. So we've really got to start looking at updating this stuff to current technology. And the plan of this would be to update the existing equipment as is, improve some of the equipment. So in certain locations, right now it's receive only. and then it transmits out from the main repeater, these other units would be able to transmit as well. So it would fill in gaps around town that we have currently, and would add another site. So
How would
it
those
get-
function during power outages?
Yes, it would.
It would?
The current site has an auxiliary generator on
Even
it.
here as well?
Here, no.
Okay.
It does not. In fact, part of this system is down right now because of a voltage spike. We're negotiating with the insurance to get that fixed right now, so. But the main transmitter is on auxiliary power up at the Sunny Hill water tank.
Okay.
And the other the other site on Leominster Shirley Road has a generator. I think the one in Leominster is battery only. I don't remember if that one has a generator. We share it with Leominster Fire, so.
How, if we do have the battery one go down plus this one go down, how closed off is our coverage?
Not horribly, it will still work, it just somewhere where crystal clear talking like this can be a lot statikier.
Okay.
And weaker, and that's what we're running into right now is you get down the far end of 2A, they can hear you, but not like they did before. And unfortunately, our town is not flat. It's a lot of hills, and that causes some of the problems. Just some other things for grant funding. We did get a grant in FY23 for $15,000 from the state. The state has been running a 5-year firefighter equipment and safety grant. That's allowing us to replace some fire hose, some of the adapters, fittings, nozzles, equipment like that. This is stuff that would normally come out of the budget. We're allowing to do that. That's kind of helped us out with some of the other items that we ran into in the budget. The EMPG, Emergency Management Preparedness Grant, it's a smaller grant. We usually see that every year. Replacing some outdated helmets, single gas carbon monoxide meters that we carry on the ambulances and some of the support vehicles. Several of them are about 10 years old and they're dying and you can't fix them anymore. And we're also updating, we carry a lot of what they call tactical medical supplies for, God forbid, if we ever have an active shooter type incident or something like that. The original batch of stuff that we got on grant funding is past its expiration date, and this is replacing all of that. So we have it, and hopefully we have to keep replacing it that way and not for real. So. Other grants, we get the SAFE and senior safes from the state. We apply for those every year. That's usually around $7,400. It's student awareness of fire education. This is for several of our members go and teach fire safety, K through 3 grades at the school. This program's been around for 20 plus years now, has made a significant impact in fire deaths, especially amongst children in the state. We also support safety senior citizens. We do some programs down with the senior center. We continue the project with the Sand for Seniors with the senior center, that elderly folk that can't get out that well, that might need a bucket of sand. We provide that for them. We also go in and inspect their home for smoke detectors, and we have free ones that we can buy through the grant. Even if they don't need sand, we can go out, put detectors in for them. We still have that program going, and that's worked out really well. Because unfortunately, so many, even the last couple fatal fires we had in town, no working smoke detectors. And you still see that a lot even today with a lot of fires, no working smoke detectors. So we continue to push to get that out. So again, heading towards the end, the impact of the budget is recommended. It's a level service budget, but it maintains existing staffing and operations for the paramedic level. It includes most of the above target requests that I submitted to the town manager. It funds our IT needs that we've come up with. It funds our EMS supply and equipment support needs. It funds the hydrant rental for Leominster, and it should hopefully take care of our fuel needs. Have any questions?
Any questions from the committee?
Chief, you mentioned the fees or the charges for the EMS runs and so forth, the EMS billing?
Yes.
Okay, so I get the right terminology here. The EMS billing, is that a significant portion of, is that a lot of revenue coming in for that?
FY22, it was a little over $388,500.
Okay.
And that was for FY22. So last year, I'm sure I don't have the numbers on that yet, because we do a lot of things in calendar years versus the fiscal year, so sometimes that overlaps, but yes.
So where does that show? Does that show up in the revenue line of the town budget, or it does as one of the other? Local receipts, that's where it is? Okay, got it.
We do maintain a revolving account that covers paying other ALS services to provide us paramedic service. That was usually running between 50 and 65,000 a year. Obviously, that number is going to come down as we're doing it more ourselves. So that's revenue that's going to be retained to the town that we're not paying out.
For the rest of the types of calls, do you charge for those too, or is it just EMS?
There's some things you still get for your tax money. We charge for permits under state law. We do charge for some permits, but fire and other response. And I always tell people, if you call 911, even for the ambulance, we don't charge you unless we take you to the hospital. There's some technicalities for billing that you can charge for that. I don't think that's right. I think if we take you to the hospital, that's one thing, but you know, if someone calls because you tripped and skinned your knee, and somebody else calls and we show up with the ambulance, you shouldn't get a bill for that because you're not the one who called us. So.
Okay. No, thank you.
Are you looking for any more than 6 paramedics, or is that kind of where you think?
Eventually, as people retire, eventually we'll probably have all paramedics. As far as adding staff, that's a conversation between myself, some of my firefighters, and the town manager. I think someday we're going to need it, but I'm not seeing it right now. I want to see where our call volume's going. The other thing to see is how we continue with the call department. It's becoming more and more of a challenge. You just don't see people that want to do that anymore. We still have them, but what the difference is as it was, it can be 20 years ago, half of them are all career fire and EMS personnel in other towns, and they still want to keep doing it, but they don't have the availability of somebody who lived and worked in town and could leave their job and take off and do that. Those people, there's a few of them left, not many. And that's just changing of the times.
Yep.
So.
And shouldn't you get a dog?
You stole my question again.
Don't say that around
No
a couple of my
dogs.
people. They keep telling me that.
I mean, you need a nice Dalmatian on the
We
back
tried to
of
get a
that.
lateral transfer for Hank, but yeah, Chief Gamble denied it. So
Okay.
he knows we got better food on our side. My phone's gonna buzz any second here now if he's watching.
Now that the 5-year staffing plan is completed, do you feel pretty comfortable with where we're at, given the increase in the call volume?
For the moment.
Okay.
For the moment. I think the next thing, especially if the call volume stays up, is if you get to 4 a shift, you can staff both ambulances.
Okay.
Right now, we can staff the first ambulance out the door. The second ambulance call, there's one person left back at the station. We're still relying on one of the call people to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when the ambulance goes out, off-duty career people, call people can come in and cover the station, get paid for it. But, you know, that's, some days you get some people, some days you don't.
Right. Okay. Sticking, I guess, with the 40B conversation for the night, how do you think that's going to affect things, given that you've seen such jumps with large communities going in? Do you
My
think?
estimate that I gave to the planning board was my, again, estimate based on the closest complex is probably Arrive, similar sizing, and we figured probably in the neighborhood of 160, 165 calls a year additional. And that's my best guess at this point. So yeah, it's going to have an effect. The vast majority of that's going to be EMS.
So that's a 10% increase effectively. So are you talking likely another FTE at that point?
Close.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be, yeah, we'll see. As the town grows, you're going to see an increased call volume, and again, the call department slowly dwindles down. There's not as many people want to get into it. The people that want to get into that now, there's less and less that want to just, okay, I want to serve my community and do that. They're younger people, they want to be firefighters. They want to be paramedics. They're going to get trained, we're a training ground. And then, I mean, we've had, I don't know how many, like I said, most of these ones that are here, they started here, now they're working in other departments. And if we're lucky, we keep them on a part-time basis. So,
Okay.
just changing demographics.
Yeah. I'm curious for, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, where you showed a graph of it was broken down by different complex.
I did. I took that one out this year, just trying to cut down the number of slides.
Of course.
But, yeah.
I'm curious to see how another,
They've sort of leveled off this year, but yeah, I mean, based on the number of housing units they were talking about, that's similar to Arrive. So that's kind of what we were basing
You're
those
basing it
numbers off of.
Okay.
That you would, we could expect to see that.
okay,
So. And again, you always see it more, the denser population.
right, of course.
Yep.
As far as foreseeable capital purchases in the near future coming up beyond the ambulance and whatnot, do you see anything else on the horizon for large?
Not having the
purchases?
capital plan right in front of me right now, the second part of the radio equipment, if that's approved, some of the smaller vehicles are coming up, and again, we sort of assess those as we go along. We base them on 10 years on a replacement cycle. If they've seen a lot of use, it might be a year earlier. If they are holding up really well, which right now they are, might move them out a little bit. The next big one would be a replacement of Squad 3, and I believe that's FY '27.
Okay,
And that's the rescue pumper, so that's a complex piece of equipment. I think I have it in there right now as $1.2 million, $1.3 million, based on guesstimates for, that was figured on 5% a year. COVID and the recent stuff threw that right out the window, so that's our best guess right now. As we get closer to it, we'll we'll figure out a harder number on that, but they're not getting cheaper.
right. Are you expecting that purchase then as well to take upwards of 24 months for delivery?
I would hope they would have straightened stuff out by then, but, they're saying they can't get frame rails for dump trucks.
Right.
So that, underneath, those things got the same components. They just get a lot fancier on top, but.
And this one, I believe, is probably more for town manager. How are we in terms of this, is it the special purpose stabilization fund that is the replacement vehicle costs are supposed to be coming from?
The large equipment and vehicles, so, that's what that fund is.
What is that one currently at,
The balance.
roughly?
The other bigger vehicle that would be in there, would be Rescue 2. And when it gets around, that would be probably towards 2029.
Okay,
And the other thing we have to look at is we've always figured on a 10-year life cycle. As they're getting more and more use, more and more wear and tear, we may look at, that may have to get shorter. We generally plan on 5 years front line, 5 years backup.
okay,
So, but like, that truck is 3 years old, it's got 40,000 miles on it. We used to retire trucks at 10 or 11 years old with that much mileage on them.
Okay.
The 2014 it's creeping towards 90,000 on it now. And that was unheard of a few years ago.
and it's still functioning well enough?
It does all right. It has its issues
Right.
in that that was a failed experiment. We went with a heavier chassis and hoping to get a little bit more life out of it, and it just didn't. A lot of places bought those trucks. Now nobody has them. Nobody's buying them anymore.
Okay.
In fact, International doesn't even make that truck anymore. So,
Okay, so doing well. Okay. Yep, go ahead.
One more question, Chief, from me. I'm just going back to your graph on page 7, I think it is, the responses by year. And just spending a little more time looking at this, it's remarkable to me how stable the number of calls are. But then 2022 really sticks out for the EMS medical. I know someone asked about that before, but it's, I'm kind of puzzled by how flat it is, and then I would have thought in 2020 or 2021 we might have seen more calls. I just don't understand it.
actually, we saw those years, especially in the initial part of the pandemic, they dropped off.
Yeah.
We would get calls, people would call, like, well, take a look at us, but we don't want to go to the hospital. And that they didn't want to come out. Back, especially when nobody really knew what was going on.
Right.
It was all a new thing for all of us. And our calls dropped way off. But then towards the end of the year, they picked up, and a lot of the theory behind that was there was a lot of people that needed to go to the hospital and put it off and put it off, and now they were so sick they had to. Last year, other than what I said before, I don't know the real reasons, other than everybody else in the area saw the same thing.
Interesting.
Fitchburg, Fitchburg and Leominster, there's days you would listen on the radio, us, Fitchburg, Leominster, Townsend, Shirley, everybody was just call after call after call after call. You know, we'd be going up there, they'd be sending somebody over here, or Leominster would send somebody over, and just everybody was going in different directions. Just a lot of call for service.
And are you still seeing that?
It's slow. It's funny. It's slowed down a little bit the first January and February, which are usually traditionally some of our slowest times of the year. The ambulance stayed busy in January. The overall calls dropped off, but the ambulance didn't drop that much. And now we're seeing it pick up again, and especially in the two cities too.
Okay, but your current staffing is handling that okay?
It's handling it for the moment. You know, like I told somebody else, ask me again in a year or two, and we'll see where we're at.
Okay.
And that whether this is an unusual bump or whether that call volume is going to continue up. I have a feeling it's going to stay up. The last time I said that, it came back down. But my crystal ball doesn't work very well.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
I suppose your calls have probably gone down because last year I think you actually had a call while you were presenting, so.
Yes, we had a fire, yeah.
So there you go.
That's a very,
Clearly
again,
down
good
from
chunk
that.
of our calls are EMS calls, but we still have fires.
Any other questions? Well, thank you as always.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Moving along to other moneyed articles.
Good evening again.
Hello, long time no see.
So I don't have a presentation. This is just a time where we can go through the warrant articles that were submitted part of the warrant process. We'll discuss them more next week during the public hearing, where you'll hear more from the sponsors as well from those articles. So I did put in your SharePoint drive the warrant.
Is it March 20, the?
Yes, that one.
There we go. Have it pulled up too.
Share it. So they're in, right now they're still lettered until the select board goes through them all. So that should, by Tuesday, we should be in a much,
But it's
clearer
close, so there's
position.
no more, right?
No more.
So it's 26 at max?
And it could go down from there.
Yeah, at max, okay, yep, good.
So the first article is your standard article, is the hear and accept written reports from town officers and committees. Second one is the revolving fund article. We have to vote on that each year with the spending limits. So those limits are all the same as last year, same accounts. The third one is to prior year expenses. So right now, we have no known prior year expenses.
Those are usually tiny anyways, right?
They're usually smaller,
Hundreds of dollars,
$500,
right.
the most a couple thousand. And that source would be free cash, most likely. The next article is for any budget adjustments to the current fiscal year, fiscal '23. So the town the town finance. Yeah.
Congratulations.
The finance director worked on this today, and she did come up with a good plan of action for how we can fund all the deficits that we're facing within the operating budget. So we shouldn't have to seek additional sources.
Including snow and ice?
Snow and ice. So snow and ice as of today was $396,000.
Okay. Where is that likely coming from at this point? All over the place, or?
Explain what you mean.
To cover that, because we usually.
Oh, the sources. Yes. So a variety of sources. Pavement management would be one. There's surpluses in certain salary lines where we had unfilled positions during the year. So it would be from those sources. the reserve fund. We haven't touched the reserve fund, so that would be one of the sources as well. So compilation.
Okay. I assume that's by
So
far
by
the
next week, we'll have a finalized
number for that one.
number.
But I'm sure that
and
that's
list
by
for you.
far the largest number that we're going to likely have in
The
that.
deficit, yes, and as I mentioned earlier in the budget season, we have a deficit in the health insurance line and the recycling program line as well.
Okay.
So, and that's why we made the adjustment for next year's recycling program.
Okay.
So Article E, we're on, is the funding that we'll need to put in the overlay to cover our worst-case scenario for the abatements applications for fiscal '23.
Is the plan for that one to do the absolute, ideally the
Yes.
1.5 million?
The 1.5 million.
Okay.
F is the capital plan, which I will have something for you next week. And it will be additional projects to be funded, now that we know more revenue sources can go towards that.
One question back on E, if we were to put $1.5 million into that, we had 200 already or whatever.
2.8 mil for free cash, you mean?
No, the overlay account?
Oh,
So then you have a balance of, I'll just use the $1.5 million, a million, but only $1 million comes in. Can we take money out of the overlay account?
Yes,
Or does it
by
just need
a-
to sit there?
a vote of the Board of Assessors to release the overlay
Oh,
surplus.
okay, so they release it? Okay, thank you.
Does that put it back into free cash automatically? Or does
It
it then have to be
would.
reappropriated?
It would if we didn't appropriate it.
Okay, so as soon as their vote happens, it immediately goes into free cash.
It goes towards the balance, what gets closed out at the end of the fiscal year.
Right,
Towards,
if the assessors release it.
Right.
And we don't appropriate that money, it would close to free cash in the year that it was released.
Okay. So in FY '23 probably then, assuming that gets closed out before the end of this fiscal
If
year.
it got closed out this year, it could be part of free cash.
Okay, otherwise we would have November and then again next May.
it would
Fourth year earliest.
likely not get closed out this fiscal year.
Okay, okay. So it'll just kind of stay there,
Right, until we have a
some
good idea as
resolution.
far as what abatement applications are appealed to the ATB,
Mm-hmm.
what the decisions are, and the impact on that account.
Okay.
Back to, so we're on G.
Yeah.
That is the fiscal '24 budget. So you pretty much heard all the budget presentations now from the departments.
Do you have a number for what that's at right now? Is it 46? Just about, a little over?
It depends what you're including on operating. Are you looking at
Straight
just?
omnibus, I assume.
Okay.
Someone's writing a book report, so I think he needs a number.
42,491.
I was emailing everybody today.
42,491,833. That doesn't include capital.
Right.
Doesn't include any.
But this warrant article wouldn't include capital in it either. It would just be the omnibus budget, correct?
Right. With the other sources from the indirect costs and, right.
Okay.
Back. So on H is the article for the clerical union, which we have not begun negotiations, so I'd anticipate this would be either removed from the warrant or tabled. I is the collective bargaining agreement with the fire union. So we have begun negotiations, and we'll see where we're at after the next meeting we have with them.
Okay.
J is the stabilization fund. And at the same time as presenting a new number for capital plan, I will do the same for stabilization and special purpose stabilization as well, and OPEB. But I would anticipate that the OPEB number will follow our policy. So it's around 282,000 from free cash. The Sewer Enterprise Fund, you heard from their budget tonight. And you also heard about their sewer capital reserve stabilization. We'll be modifying as far as combining the sewer OPEB. We always do that. We combine it into one article. And so the two amounts are just voted. So it is segregated, but for the ease of town meeting and efficiencies. P is the Solid Waste Disposal Program Enterprise Fund, and that's the same amount as last year, $302,000. Q is the Water Enterprise Fund for fiscal '24. That's the same amount as this current fiscal year, is $25,000. You heard from Public Access tonight, so that's R for their budget. S is one of the only funding monetary articles besides the regular budget articles. This is for $25,000. They're looking to do a survey of historic homes, and it's a matching grant, but it requires upfront costs of the $25,000 with half that amount coming back if they receive that grant.
And what are they trying to achieve?
Basically, I can pull up the exactly what they submitted, but to do a complete survey of all the historic homes, I think in Lunenburg is the purpose of that. But I'll get more of the backup documentation for you.
Okay.
How old does the home have to be considered historic? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know the answer.
Just wondering if my home is considered historic.
I know for the APDC, it's 75 years and older.
Right. Is it? For APDC? For APDC, okay.
T is the Salary Administration Plan for fiscal '24. The Personnel Committee has a meeting on Monday. They probably will be submitting a modification from what their original intent was. They're undergoing a compensation and classification study right now, but are not at a point to recommend any market adjustments to that yet. But they may be proposing a COLA for fiscal '24.
When do they think that they'll be ready for that? Last year, their stuff came in fairly late in the process, if I remember.
If it's a straight COLA, I would assume they would hopefully make that decision next week.
So we may hear something on this even next week?
Right.
Okay.
So Heather, sorry, back to S with the historic district. Does that exist in the current budget, or this is a separate item that would be funded from where?
Separate item, so standalone funding article outside of the budget.
Okay. And where would that money come from?
Free cash.
Free cash. Okay.
U is for a TIF agreement with Lufa Farms. So I'm still, we're in limbo right now whether we need this article or not. So next week
What do you mean by that, whether we need it?
as far as where they're at in the stage of the process of being prepared to move forward now, do they, because they have a whole process they do with the state as far as meeting a timeline for funding.
Can a TIF agreement be approved in special town meeting, or does it have to be?
Yes.
Okay. So if it does get kicked, it'll probably just be November.
Yes.
Okay.
Most likely, if anything at all, it would look very similar to the one you've already seen.
To the one which, I'm sorry?
That's already, was voted
Okay,
for
this
Bright
was a
Farms.
couple years
It's
ago.
It's the same property.
Okay, and this is, I'm sorry, could you explain what it is again?
A tax increment financing agreement. Basically, it's so gives a discounted rate up front, and over time increases the assessment for taxes to 100%.
So they're
It's high-
typically used to draw business into a certain area of town, certain types of business.
break.
Right.
I honestly don't know why we're doing it. I'm not in favor of it. I wasn't in favor of the last one either, but
It was very discussed at town meeting, or at the town meeting last time.
yeah, I mean, personally, I think the timing of this one's very interesting because we're getting a lot of comments about how businesses aren't paying their fair share. And now we're gonna give a break to a company, but
It's very likely this won't make it to town meeting this
okay.
May,
Okay.
just because at the point we're at
Okay.
in March.
So one of
I
the
wouldn't
things
spend
that-
a whole lot of discussion tonight on it.
Yeah, okay, fair
One of the
enough.
things that had been brought up, and I think they shot down, which was to give an easement and access to the Saliba South property, the parks portion of the Saliba property, to avoid the traffic on, was it Northfield Road? Did they shoot that down?
I don't know that they did.
Okay, so that's still on the table for negotiations with them?
Right, there's been really no negotiations.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay.
So this isn't a select board issue, this is a Lufu Farms issue at this point for the delay, I guess, or for the potential for it being pushed over?
We're checking in to see where they're at in the process.
Okay, got it.
V is likely to be removed, as the select board voted at their meeting on Tuesday. This was one of the not budget requests, but earmark requests to be submitted to the legislators. But due to the critical nature of the security system and that it should be a more immediate need and immediate funding, so they will be voting on Tuesday whether it can come out of ARPA funding or not. So this can be taken care of as soon as possible.
Do you have a rough number of that, just in case you
It's
don't?
81 and some odd, so 82,000.
Okay.
And W is the Senior Tax Relief Program article. It's to petition the legislature to do a home rule petition. And there's a lot to digest there. There is
Yep.
additional tweaking to be done. I don't know if you watched the select board's meeting on Tuesday.
What else
There's
would we
just-
do on Tuesdays?
Get ready for Wednesday.
Go to Aruba.
Just out of general curiosity, do we have an estimate for how this would affect, for a number of how this would sort of decrease the senior tax burden?
I don't have that off the top of my head, yeah.
What was that actually
something-
looked at
yeah.
before, in the process of
think-
doing this?
Yes.
Okay.
I honestly,
Yeah.
I wouldn't wanna,
Yeah.
no, I can't do that off the
Yeah,
top of my
yeah.
head.
And just out of curiosity, since we were talking about tax breaks before, does that, I assume that tax burden isn't going to come just out of the town itself, it's going to be dispersed
It's dispersed universally for the rest of
for
the
a
tax
residential
base.
and commercial?
The whole tax base.
Okay, okay. Got it.
X is from the Cemetery Commission. They typically have this article on town meeting warrant, and this is for 10,000 from the sale of lots. And they use it towards different projects at the cemeteries.
Do they all, how do they always have $10,000 for the sale of lots every year? I mean, is our purchase of lots the same every
No,
single?
It's about 80 some odd thousand $10,000 in that account. It's cumulative.
Okay.
It's held in a trust fund.
Okay.
And they just appropriate $10,000
Got
in
it.
there for their use.
Okay. I've just always wondered how they knew exactly that they were going to have $10,000 a year in sales. It's really good predictions.
Y is an article from the planning board. It's about adding self-storage to require a special permit.
The shortest article they've ever written.
Adam will talk for a while. Don't worry about it.
And Z is to establish a opioid settlement stabilization fund for all the revenue that we have received and will receive in the future from those settlements we entered into.
Are we going to have a number to put into that fund, or would that have to be a separate article? One to create the fund and one to put money into it?
There's approximately 84,000 right now that we've received.
What do we do with that money?
That's to be decided.
By,
So there was no mechanism yet by the state to authorize that it be created as a special account. So it can be appropriated at town meeting. That's how it has been left. And this is another option as well.
How that money would get dispersed or used, that comes to town, I assume?
Through this method, yes.
Okay.
but what kinds of things would we do with that money?
Anything related to opioid education or addressing.
Like Narcan, could we buy Narcan with it?
Could be that, it could be similar to like counselors to address issues like that.
Okay.
Are we-
Haven't had a lot of discussion, honestly, about intent.
Do we have
So-
much money? Oh,
So Heather, could you just explain the basics of this? So there was litigation by the state, and there's money that's come in from litigation, and then this is just dispersing it to towns? Is that what's happening?
Essentially, but in the beginning, it was probably at least 3 years ago, probably, there was a national consortium case, so we had opted in at that point to be part of that. So it wasn't through the state, it was a consortium of law firms, and we were asked if we wanted to join that.
The town of Lunenburg was asked?
Yes.
Okay.
In the end, how the settlements came down, it was dispersed to towns as well that didn't join that initial case. That's just how it worked out through the court system. But we did benefit, and all the fees we didn't pay anything out of pocket, essentially. I was going to say there was no additional attorney fees for joining. It was all that's paid through the settlement that comes down from the courts.
And do we know how much money this is?
We've received around 84,000 to date. I can get you numbers on projection.
And are there restrictions on how we can use it?
I think, not that I know of,
Okay.
but I think our intent, as far as the minimal conversation that we've had on this, would be related to the opioid epidemic.
Is there, go ahead.
Is this supposed to be a reoccurring revenue or a one-time?
One time. So, well, no. So reoccurring in the fact that the settlement comes in trenches, like as far as it's paid out amounts each year for a certain amount of period of time.
And then it's going to end.
Right.
So we don't know what, like, a total
I will
revenue
get
would
that.
be.
So 84 is just the first tranche of it?
Yes.
Okay.
So why won't we just put in the free cash?
That's my question too. Why would we restrict our use of it?
I think because the intent was to use it towards something related to why we joined the litigation suit in the first place.
Okay.
So a couple of years ago, we looked at all these reserve funds that we have for various the various funds we had, right? And there's some that, like speeding, there's like a whole bunch of these ones. And I don't know that we have a plan to like spend any of them, do we?
I don't know which
And this
ones you're
could-
talking about.
You went through a list where there was all these special purpose funds, and there was one like,
Maybe Karen did? Wasn't me.
I don't recall that.
well, so don't we have a whole bunch of funds that are available that we don't typically talk about through the budget season?
Yep, like gift funds. and
Gift
that.
funds and,
Trust funds.
yeah, it just seems that this might be another one that just goes off into there and just sits there forever.
I don't agree. I think it would
Okay.
be. Yeah, I think if you talk to the police chief and fire chief, I think they would have intended purposes for the funds.
Okay.
Do we have any idea how many more, did they give you an idea as to how many kind of chunks are expected, or how long?
I will get all that information for
Okay.
next week.
And then, I suppose, do we have, this is probably more a question for the chief, do we have many statistics for any opioid issues within town that would sort of be geared for this sort of funding that we know of?
As far as numbers,
Yeah,
I can request that from him.
okay.
I'm sure it's tracked.
Okay.
That's all the articles.
That's impressive. We didn't make it to double letters this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions on the articles presented so far? All right.
Great.
Thank you. I'm going to assume that we probably don't have a town manager report in the last 24 hours, or business director? Okay. So moving on quickly, again, same thing from last night. I did get about halfway through the paper as I was talking to Chris before the meeting. I'm finding it's interestingly difficult to write a letter to the town that is non-biased for my personal opinions, but I do have a decent chunk of it done. My intention is to continue working on it tomorrow and get it sent out before the weekend, so that we can at least get a look for it, get a look at it. That we will have time to discuss it on the 30th, and then time to vote on it on this by the 6th, so we can do revisions, and we can, I believe, we can't work on it individually. I guess we could work on it individually, and we could send chunks back or recommendations back to me, but we wouldn't be able to just have a living document in the share folder that we work on, because that would violate open meeting law. But once I send it out, if there are other ideas or concerns or questions or thoughts, just send them back to me directly, so that we don't have any issues with that one. Otherwise, we can obviously discuss it openly on the 30th and the 6th. For the capital plan, we've already heard that one. You had mentioned yesterday that you might have a number for, or a few ideas for us for tonight for that. Is that pushed off to the 30th at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Is it possible that we could have those numbers prior to the 30th, just so we have a chance to kind of look at them ourselves before we vote on them that night?
Like I said last night, I'm going to try.
Okay, that would be great. Any final budget season conversation topics on the tax assessments or the abatement discussion? Works for me.
No.
We do not have any minutes to review, which is great. So we didn't do committee reports last night. I'm happy to do them tonight if there are any specifically that came up. Might as well just go straight down the line.
I don't have anything.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Anything, Jay?
No, we heard sewer tonight, so.
Parks?
No, nothing to report. I just wanted to follow back up on, the thing that I was referring to was the special revenue funds, and there's like 165 of them. That you guys, you gave us a list of them back in like, when I joined, right as I joined, so like almost 3 years ago.
Was it just an Excel spreadsheet?
It was like this huge Excel
Yeah.
spreadsheet. And just some of them like displaced students / Puerto Rico for $10,000, like,
That's been sitting there for
Yeah,
probably
like-
4 years.
yeah, what do we,
That's school money. That was the result of the hurricane that they had in Puerto Rico, and some of the kids came up here, and the state reimbursed cities and towns for that, and the school has just never spent the money.
all right, I mean, there's just like,
There's a lot
there's a
of,
ton of money sitting in all these accounts, and do we have plans to spend them? And that was my fear, is that it just becomes another one,
yeah.
that there's $82,000 sitting in it. And so, be interested, if we had an update to this too, that would probably be good for everyone to see.
I want to update that before the end of the fiscal year anyway, because,
You're retiring?
well, I'm retired. And we also have to make sure that we don't have any deficits in any of those, because some of those, there's grant funds in there as well, so we
Yeah.
have to make sure that we request the funds so they don't hit our free cash.
Okay.
So when I update it, I'll put it in that shared drive for you guys.
Okay.
As far as spending out of those accounts go, I guess that would roll up the next question, is that it does make sense to use some of those funds at some point. Is there any plan to, whether be it consolidate them or contact department heads to say, you've got this money, you should spend it, or we can move it to other accounts, rather than just let it sit there?
Yeah.
We can't just move it, because when we received the funds, it was received for whatever the purpose was at the time of the receipt of the funds. So if it's for a particular department and for a particular purpose, then that's how the money needs to be spent. We can't just, I would love to be able to just close them all out and take them into the general fund and call it a day, but you can't do that.
So how do we spend hurricane relief for Puerto Rico?
Well, but.
Just for that one, just out of
No,
curiosity.
but see, when we got that money, of course, that's what it was titled, but the school department could spend that money on any school-related expense.
Okay, so we could, in theory, go to the department heads and say, you
Spend the
have
money.
these,
They have to
these,
request it.
right,
Spend the money,
these
yeah.
funds that you have available to you, here's the names of them. Why don't we start pulling funds from these different things to fill other positions? I mean, I know the school department has ESSER funding that's running out. Can they take that $10,000 and put it into a language arts program? And
They could,
fund a.
well, from my standpoint, they could do anything that's related to school.
Okay.
They could spend that money on. And Mr. Cassidy and the school department themselves, I mean, they get copies of those
do.
reports, so they know what they have.
Are they broken down by department?
For the town departments, no, but it's summarized with all the school accounts and then all the town accounts.
Okay,
So,
okay. Yeah,
but you can pretty much, well, I shouldn't say that because on some of the older ones you can't, but by looking at the names of the funds, you can pretty much identify which department they belong to on the town side.
So in other words, for this opioid one, it would go on the town, I guess, list itself for the town's spending, but it would be theoretically pushed out to the police department, fire department, in all likelihood,
Well,
right?
the
Or
way
does it
that
get kind
that
of gray at
article
that
is
point?
written now, though, it would be a stabilization fund.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be part of our trust fund portfolio. And in order to spend money out of that fund, it would require a town meeting vote.
Okay.
So there would have to be an article on at town meeting that would pull money out of that account and allow it to be expended on whatever the purpose is that it was voted for.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And I assume we don't have the ability to take funds out of some of these other accounts and put them into a stabilization account for that department?
No,
We can't just say this is a school stabilization fund?
correct.
Okay.
Okay, so as a part of my civics lessons here, so there's also this like commissioners of trust funds committee or something. What's that one we vote on?
At the meeting,
Caucus.
at the annual town meeting?
No, when we vote for town, it's an election thing, right? Commissioners of trust funds or something? What do they do?
Well, we have a trust fund portfolio, and the trust fund commissioners, I shouldn't even say that, because there's a lot of trust funds, but like the library is in charge of the expenditure of their funds, and the cemetery is in charge of the expenditure of their funds. So all the trust funds that don't fall someplace would be the ones that the trust fund commissioners, like we have a Worthy Poor Trust Fund, we have, I'm trying to think of some of the other, like a Sidewalks and Grounds Trust Fund. The trust, if money were to be spent out of those accounts, it would have to be approved by the trust fund commissioners. That would be their role, and they were also, I mean, they're not very active, but years ago, no, honestly, years ago, they were very involved
believe it.
in, like, how those funds were invested.
But,
Yeah.
okay, but these are different trust funds or some subset of those trust funds in that Excel list you sent us?
No, those aren't even included in that.
Oh, so there's another list of
It's
funds.
the trust funds are totally outside. So we have the general fund, we have special revenue funds, we have trust funds, we have enterprise funds. So what you're looking at is just special revenue funds. Trust funds are totally outside of that.
Okay.
So if
And
so if I
those are-
can, oh, I'm
Those are
sorry.
set up and can only be spent for certain things as well. And for the most part, trust funds, the principal balance of a trust fund is non-expendable, and the portion that they can spend is the interest.
Okay.
Those funds that you're looking at can be fully expended, they just haven't been.
So I would propose, Mr. Chairman, that maybe after town meeting, this would be a good topic for us to just dig into and understand better. Does that make sense?
Exactly what I was going to bring up for upcoming meetings, or for future meetings.
Future meeting, yeah.
And then the other point to me is the interest rate environment has changed dramatically, right? And so I'd be interested too in what are the restrictions on the investments to these different types of funds too. Because I think there's an opportunity to be very safely invested, but make a decent amount of interest.
Exactly,
Right.
and we are actually exploring that right
Okay.
now. I mean, you heard
Pack.
Mr. Walker say
Yeah,
he had asked about T-bills, because now if you look at T-bills, they're like paying almost 5%, and our money, or his particular account is probably getting less than 1 right now.
Was it
In
0.06%?
the bank where it's at.
Just about
so,
0.06% or something like that?
yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to
So-
say, like a very safe government money market fund.
So we're looking at
It's like
those
3
options
to
as we
4%,
speak,
yeah.
but I can tell you, I've been here 38 years, and with the exception of like our trust fund, trust fund portfolio that's held by Bartholomew, where they have the ability to invest in all of those different things, the town has basically gone to banks
Yeah.
and put their money there. We've done like maybe certificates of deposit or things like that, but we've never, in all the years that I've been here, invested in like treasury bills or anything like that, so.
Okay, so it might be good to understand what what if any of the restrictions are on investments? I
Yeah,
don't know if there's,
we can look at our policy.
state
and we can look at
legislation
the
or
general
policy,
laws.
yeah.
They actually have a legal list of
Okay.
where municipal funds can be invested.
Okay.
Written right into the general laws.
Thank you.
Just one last question. How large is your binder going to be for when you retire? If you start, how large is the binder going to be for when you retire for?
It's all right here.
Exactly, so that's why it needs to be a
And
binder.
I told Heather, I am retiring, but
And
Consultants,
shutting off the
I will
phone.
come back.
consultants make a lot of money.
yeah,
true.
consult.
It's funny because I've been here so long, I care more about what happens in Lunenburg than I do my own town.
Thank
I'm
you.
not gonna, like, disappear off the face of the earth. You might have to, like, reach me down on Cape Cod, but
My son's on,
yeah, laptop and I'll be good to go.
All right, so ideas for future meetings, I just took notes on those too, for that exact reason. I think that's a good one to get into. Any other ideas for now? I mean, we've got plenty going on.
yeah,
We can obviously, we can discuss that in the middle of April.
yeah.
Is there any public comment from the committee?
I just have one comment, is that I am not available for next week's meeting, so I can't make that one. And I don't know if Tom is available or not,
I
but,
believe he said he was only going to be gone for this week. I think
okay.
he said he would be back for next week's.
But 4 would work, right?
Forward, yes, because it's just out of 7.
But we are taking votes on all the,
Correct. But in all likelihood, we usually don't have all the numbers, so we'll probably defer at
Okay.
least a number of them at that point for next week. And then I have it written down for the 20th of April for a second public hearing, so we can just push it to that one.
Okay.
Upcoming meetings, we have our public hearing next week, and we will vote on recommendations as well for the articles. We will have a meeting on April 6th, which is just a standard meeting. It should be pretty quick, though, just to kind of finalize report and any other topics that we need to do beforehand, before publication, printing goes out. And then I have April 20th as a second public hearing option, skipping the 13th. That works for people. That way we don't have to have, we've had a lot of weeks with them every week, a meeting. That does take us out of our normal schedule, but we could easily jump back into that in May. As far as the 27th goes, I think we should just keep that open as we'll see how next week and the 6th go. We can make the decision then, whether we need the 27th. Other than that, I'd happily take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 9:28, 2 minutes early.
Yay.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.